I am now an expert on Israel's economy. Thank you. I always look forward to the Jerusalem Post conference, and I thank the paper's editors and writers who have worked so hard to keep us up to date since October 7th. I also believe there is no audience that follows events in Israel more closely and cares more deeply than all of you, and I thank you for that. I thank you. Today, in spite of the introduction you just heard, I am not speaking to you as the president of the World Jewish Congress that represents 100 Jewish communities around the world. Today I'm speaking to you as a Jew, an individual Jew. There are many reasons why Israel was surprised on the morning of October 7th. Everyone in this room has heard them. Who should have known? Who was at fault? Who should have seen this coming? That's all history now. For a brief moment after October 7th, the world showed sympathy for the Jewish state. The Israeli flag was rejected on the Eiffel Tower, the Brandenburg Gate, and in sports stadiums throughout the world. Okay. But within days after the attack, while Israel was still counting its dead, we saw the world turn against Israel. This shocked and confused many people. They assumed it was just anti-Semitism and that it was spontaneous. While anti-Semitism played a small part, the reason this turnabout took place was not at all spontaneous. Little do we realize that we were witnessing the unfolding of the first premeditated, full-blown social media war against a people and a nation. Israel's enemies were well prepared to launch their global campaign to blame the very victims of the terror attack against them. What happens if the United States had been attacked with the equivalent of 50,000 dead? After 9/11, there were 3,000 killed. Nobody questioned the U.S. response. No one would have questioned the response of any other country if it happened to them. Why is Israel the only country on earth that cannot defend its citizens against terrorists? It's because Hamas controlled the narrative through social media. It's because sophisticated operators linked to Hamas began a 24/7 barrage against Israel and unleashed vile streams of anti-Semitism on social media and other platforms. We soon realized these forces also embedded themselves in our greatest institutions of learning. College and universities that many of us have deep connections with, and turned them into platforms of hate. These two influences together created the powerful and negative reaction against Israel that we saw after October 7th. This eventually led to the charges in the UN, the ICC, and the WJC, and huge demonstrations around the world. Make no mistake, this is a war for the hearts and minds of people against Israel and Western civilization. Many of us in this room don't understand the importance of social media of young people today. You must realize young people get all their news on their iPhones and computers, and 97% of the news they see on Israel is negative, and only 3% is positive. All day and all night, young people are bombarded with lies that Israel is a colonial settler nation, an oppressor nation, an illegitimate nation, and the Palestinian people are the oppressed. Suddenly, no one seemed interested in the fact that Hamas started the war. No one was interested in the brutal killings of innocent and unnamed civilians. Elderly women, children, and babies were killed. The world didn't care about the rapes of women and the mass abductions. At the same time, Hamas used its own people as human shields. They didn't care about Palestinian lives as they used mosques, hospitals, schools, and homes to cover for their fighters. That's a war crime. And it was rarely reported in the media. And it was ignored in the politics here in the U.S. A recent poll showed that 30 to 35% of all Democrats today consider themselves progressives, especially the young. And progressives are strongly anti-Israel. That same negative influence has targeted the United States as a racist, colonialist, oppressive state. It doesn't stop there. All of Western civilization is a target as well. Just days after October 7th, and that is not by chance, a call went out for people to gather for demonstrations. There were suddenly flags, well-produced signs, face masks, and organizers with billions of bullhorns to lead the chants. This is all designed to intimidate us. Israel was not prepared for this. The United States was not prepared. The entire West was not prepared. Ironically, Israel knows social media better than most countries, and Jews invented public relations. Israel must now make this a priority. It must totally dominate social media. There should be a special department with an unlimited budget. After what I heard, maybe it's still more difficult. Of the best people working on this, because unfortunately, that is exactly what Iran has: money to spend on social media. Israel cannot afford to lose this front, and neither can the United States. It is that important. Our enemies knew they could change young people's point of view in Israel, and then the U.S., and that soon America would no longer be the leader of the free world, completely changing the world order in their favor. They knew they could not defeat the U.S. or Israel militarily, but they had a long view, and with enough time, they could defeat us from within. There's a second part of all this, and it comes in the field of education. Over the past 50 years, far-left radicals from the Vietnam era went into education. In the 1970s and 80s, they began to take over departments and cut off opposing views, along with an anti-American focus. They were also anti-Israel as well. Recently, more than 2,000 professors signed a letter denouncing Israel. These are the teachers that are teaching our children. This surprised no one. I want to remind you that the first place they kicked out Jews was in Germany in the 1930s, and they kicked them out from the universities. Our enemies learned a lesson. There was another factor at work here. 4 years ago, the Abraham Accords caught the world by surprise. People began to think that peace would finally come to the Middle East. Israel seemed to be on the verge of an historic agreement with Saudi Arabia. What Israel and the United States did not take into account was that its enemies saw the Abraham Accords as a direct threat to their goal of the destruction of Israel, and they would do anything to stop them. Again, this was years in the planning, and again, no one saw it coming. The Abraham Accords have been a great success, and hopefully we will see a peace accord with Saudi Arabia. I have made many trips to the Middle East, and you may not believe this, but I firmly believe that the people in these countries want peace as much as we do. The attacks on October 7th were not just against Israel. They were an attack on peace. This comes down to bridge builders versus haters, and I've always been a bridge builder. I'm confident that the Middle East in the near future will become a place of peace and prosperity. There is something else I'd like to talk about, which is not easy, but we have to address it. That's the divide within our own people in Israel. This disunity falls along two major fault lines. There are the ultra-Orthodox Jews who have kept our religion alive and passed it on to future generations, thus continuing the Jewishness of our people. But Haredi Jews, for the most part, shy away from the defense of Israel, as well as connections to secular Jews. And there are the conservative and reform and secular Jews who have maintained a strong connection with the outside world, but in some cases, they have little knowledge of our traditions and our religion. It has been said that the Hamas attack brought a divided Israel back together. But we cannot, and we should not, rely on our enemies to bring us together as a people. A unity must come from within. It has to come from every one of us. If we fight amongst ourselves, we are helping our enemies achieve their goal. And let me remind you, those enemies want us dead. Is that serious? We absolutely must put aside all differences and see all Jews as people we must protect. At this moment, Israel is at a crossroads. It is fighting, and its young people are dying in the defense of the Jewish state. The northern front could open up any day, and there's always Iran in the background. On top of all this, Israel has to fight on the social media and public relations front. This is something we in the diaspora can do to help. We may not have here in the diaspora an IDF, But we have our own weapons. We have our intelligence and ingenuity. We have our connections. And each one of us has our own different skills. I spent the last 17 years of my life going to most of the 100 Jewish communities around the globe. And in every single community, I found Jews, young Jews, that felt deeply connected to Israel and wanted to help. Like them, I believe every Jew in the diaspora must not just stand with Israel, but find ways to help in any way they can. And if you think one person can't make a difference, I can tell you something. 37 years ago, I was the world's most nominal Jew. But after I encountered anti-Semitism for the first time when I was the U.S. ambassador to Austria, it changed the course of my life. That's when I saw Jewish children who had just come out of the Soviet Union, who were never allowed to be Jewish. Their parents were so eager for them to learn their heritage that the Chabad rabbi in Vienna started a small kindergarten. I thought, if they were so desperate to learn their heritage, how could I ignore it? I was so moved by what I saw that I built a larger kindergarten, and then a school, and then another school in another city. Today, almost 40 years later, there are 30 different Jewish schools from kindergartens through colleges throughout Eastern and Central Europe and the former Soviet Union. When my students see anti-Semitism, they put on their yarmulkes and wear them proudly. I asked some of the mothers if they were concerned for their safety, and they looked at me as if I was crazy. They told me it makes them so proud to see their children doing what they're doing. 40,000 students have now graduated from these schools. That means there are 40,000 proud Jews, 40,000 Jews who would have been lost. They have now started Jewish families and reclaimed Jewish communities that many people thought were gone forever. When I did this, nobody came to help me, and some even said I would fail and that I was wasting my money. I didn't listen to them. I did it anyway because I knew it would work, and it did. Along the way, I learned that one person can make a difference. Each one of you can as well in your own way. I may not be here to see the results of all that I built, but that hardly matters. I did something. I started something. And all of us in the diaspora need to do this as well. We stand on the shoulders of giants who came before us, some whose names we will never know. All those Jews who came to Israel to rebuild our homeland. They had nothing but belief. That is a belief that all of us share. But beyond belief, they had courage. Just as these early Israelis allowed the world, what courage was it in 1948, in 1967, 1973 in Entebbe, and yes, today in Gaza. We must also find that courage. We will draw courage from each other. We always have. We need Israel just as much as Israel needs us. We will stand with our brothers and sisters in our eternal homeland. We will never let them down. Our generation has two enormous, important fights before us. First, and most important, to make sure that our children and grandchildren grow up to be proud Jews, and they are not turned against us. Teachers today in schools, starting in kindergarten and going right through college, are teaching their children, Jewish children, not to be good Jews, to hate Jews. If you're a child or you know a child who are experiencing any type of anti-Semitism in the classroom, I want you to make it known. It's not acceptable if a teacher says Jews are bad people. This is in kindergarten. There's woke kindergarten that teaches children as young as 4 and 5 years old not to be good. And may we become one people again, from the most orthodox to the most secular. Our generation has never had to fight, but now we do. We must fight on the new battlefield of social media. We must fight in our schools and take them back. We must fight just as Israelis are fighting, and just as hard. The people who attacked Israel on October 7th, the people who want us to wipe Israel from the pages of history, are in a minority. And we've seen this before, from Pharaoh to Haman to Hitler, and they've never succeeded. Remember this, the vast majority of good people everywhere, and here in America, are with us and support us. This is not 1939, and we are not the helpless Jews of 1939. This is an Israeli, this is an IDF, and there is also in the diaspora that will stand with Israel forever. May God continue to bless the people of Israel and the Jewish state. And may God bless all of you. Am Yisrael Kai, the people who will live. Thank you.